The courtroom was silent, not the normal kind of silence that happens during legal arguments. This was different. This was the kind of silence that feels heavy, dangerous, like everyone in the room instinctively knew they were seconds away from witnessing something unforgettable. At the center of that silence stood a woman named Karen Henderson, 48 years old, arms crossed, jaw-tight fecks, burning red with anger, and standing directly across from her sat one of the most feared television judges in America, Judge Judy Sheindlin. The cameras were rolling. The audience watched nervously. And then Karen made the biggest mistake of her entire life. She pointed directly at Judge Judy and shouted, "I pay your salary." The courtroom froze. You could actually hear people gasp. One audience member covered her mouth in shock. Another leaned back in disbelief. Even the bailiff looked stunned for half a second, because everyone understood something Karen Henderson clearly didn't. You do not scream at Judge Judy and walk away unchanged. What happened next would become one of the most talked about courtroom moments on the internet. Within days, millions of people had watched the clip, but the viral explosion wasn't just because Karen embarrassed herself. It was because nobody realized Judge Judy had already figured her out long before the case even started. Karen thought she was walking into court to humiliate another contractor. What she didn't know was that she was actually walking into a trap. And Judge Judy had spent the entire morning quietly building the case that would destroy her credibility in front of millions of viewers. But before we get to the moment Karen's entire world collapsed, you need to understand exactly who she was. Because this wasn't just a rude customer. This wasn't just a difficult homeowner. Karen Henderson had spent years perfecting a scam that ruined hardworking people's lives. And this time, she picked the wrong victim. Karen Henderson lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Connecticut. To most people, she appeared completely normal. She worked occasionally as a substitute teacher. She volunteered at local community events, and online she presented herself as a taxpayer advocate, fighting against corruption and incompetence. But behind that image was someone very different. Karen had become obsessed with power. Not real power, the kind of fake power that comes from humiliating people who aren't allowed to fight back. She spent years targeting public employees, customer service workers, contractors, and small business owners. Her routine was almost identical every single time. She would enter a business or government office already recording on her phone. Then she would intentionally create tension. She'd complain loudly, interrupt employees, escalate tiny misunderstandings into dramatic confrontations, and eventually, once the employee became frustrated or exhausted, Karen would deliver her favorite line, "I pay your salary." To her online followers, Karen acted like a hero exposing lazy workers. But to the people who actually dealt with her, she was a nightmare. And over time, Karen discovered something disturbing. Intimidation worked, especially against people with limited resources, especially against hardworking small business owners who couldn't afford expensive legal battles. That realization eventually evolved into something much darker, a system, a scam. A weaponized strategy designed to get thousands of dollars worth of work for free. The contractors all described the same pattern. At first, Karen seemed polite and easy to work with. She would hire someone for legitimate home renovation work, agree to the pricing, sign contracts without complaints. And during the project itself, she often acted cheerful and satisfied. Then came the final invoice. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, Karen would claim there were serious problems. The work was dangerous. The craftsmanship was unacceptable. But strangely, she almost never provided evidence, no inspection reports, no repair estimates, no detailed documentation. Instead, she relied on something far more destructive. Public humiliation. Karen would flood review sites with one-star ratings. She would accuse contractors of fraud online, post emotional stories in local community groups, and sometimes even share personal business phone numbers publicly, encouraging strangers to harass them. Most contractors simply gave up. Fighting her cost too much money, too much time, too much stress. Karen understood that, and she exploited it ruthlessly. By the time she met David Chen, she had already done this multiple times. But David wasn't going to disappear quietly. David Chen came to America with almost nothing. 17 years earlier, he arrived carrying a small toolbox inherited from his father and less than $400 in savings. He didn't have connections. He didn't have wealthy relatives. He didn't have investors. What he had was discipline, work ethic. and pride in craftsmanship. For years, David took whatever jobs he could find. Tiny repairs, kitchen tile replacements, painting jobs nobody else wanted. He worked 7 days a week, sometimes 14 hours a day. Slowly, his reputation grew. Customers trusted him because he treated their homes carefully. He arrived on time, communicated clearly, cleaned up after every project. And unlike many contractors, David never disappeared halfway through a job. Over time, his business became successful, not flashy, not luxurious, but stable, respected, honest. That reputation meant everything to him, because for small business owners like David, reputation is survival. One false accusation can destroy years of hard work. And Karen Henderson knew exactly how to use that against people. Karen contacted David about renovating her bathroom. At first, nothing seemed unusual. She acted friendly during the consultation. She approved his quote of $3,200, signed the paperwork, agreed the timeline. David saw no red flags. The renovation itself went smoothly. 2 weeks of careful work, new tile installation, updated plumbing fixtures, fresh paint, custom shelving. David documented everything professionally with photos and receipts. And when the project finished, Karen appeared thrilled. She smiled during the walkthrough, complimented the tile work, even took pictures herself. "You exceeded my expectations." She texted him afterward. David left believing he had completed another successful project. He had no idea the nightmare was just beginning. 3 days later, David sent the final invoice, no response. Another few days passed, still nothing. Eventually he called Karen directly. That's when the tone completely changed. Karen sounded cold, hostile, aggressive. Suddenly she claimed the bathroom was full of serious issues. She accused David of poor workmanship, property damage, negligence. When David calmly offered to return and fix anything she was unhappy with, Karen refused, completely. She said she didn't trust him in her home anymore. Then the online attacks started. And they came fast. 1-star reviews appeared everywhere. Google, Facebook, local contractor sites. Karen wrote long emotional posts accusing David of destroying her bathroom. She claimed he was dishonest, dangerous, unprofessional. Within days, strangers were calling his business phone screaming insults. Potential clients canceled appointments. Existing customers became nervous. David watched years of hard-earned trust collapse almost overnight. His income dropped dramatically. His wife begged him to move on and rebuild quietly. But David realized something important. If he let Karen get away with this, she would do it again, to someone else. So despite the financial risk, he decided to fight back. And that decision changed everything. When the case reached Judge Judy's courtroom, Karen felt confident. Why wouldn't she? Her intimidation tactics had worked for years. Most people backed down. Most people became exhausted. Most people couldn't outlast her emotionally or financially. What Karen didn't know was that Judge Judy's production team had already started digging into her background. And what they found was shocking. Multiple contractors described nearly identical experiences, different years, different projects. Same pattern: approval, accusation, refusal to pay. Public harassment: one contractor lost half his clients, another nearly closed his business. One woman who ran a small electrical company eventually filed for bankruptcy after Karen destroyed her online reputation. Judge Judy reviewed every detail, and something immediately stood out. Karen's complaints were always emotional, but rarely specific. Lots of outrage, very little evidence. That raised alarms instantly. Then the investigation uncovered something even worse: Karen's own social media posts. Posts where she openly bragged about strategies for avoiding final contractor payments. Posts where she encouraged others to make contractors work for every dollar. One post reportedly explained how negative reviews could pressure small businesses into giving up. Another suggested delaying legal proceedings until contractors couldn't afford to continue fighting. To Judge Judy, this wasn't just entitlement anymore. It looked like calculated fraud. By the time Karen entered the courtroom, Judge Judy already knew exactly who she was dealing with. Karen just didn't realize it yet. The case began normally enough. David presented his documents calmly. Photos, contracts, docs, messages, invoices. Judge Judy listened carefully. Then Karen began speaking. Immediately, her performance started. Dramatic sighs, sarcastic expressions, exaggerated frustration. She claimed the bathroom renovation was a disaster. But when Judge Judy asked for proof, Karen struggled. Where were the photos of the damage? She didn't have them. Inspection reports? No. Repair estimates? Nothing. Every answer became vague. The work was bad. The bathroom felt wrong. There were issues everywhere. Judge Judy narrowed her eyes, because experienced judges notice something important. Truthful people usually provide details. Liars often rely on emotion. Then Judge Judy asked the question that changed everything. Miss Henderson, have you had disputes with contractors before? Karen visibly froze. It's irrelevant, she snapped. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. I'll decide what's relevant. The courtroom became tense instantly. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Well, maybe once or twice. Judge Judy's voice stayed calm. How many contractors have you refused to pay? Karen's face flushed red. Now she looked angry, cornered, defensive. This courtroom is clearly biased against me, she suddenly exploded. Judge Judy replied firmly, sit down. But Karen had already lost control. Years of arrogance took over. She stood up, pointed directly at Judge Judy and shouted, I pay your salary. The room went completely silent, pommel silence. Even the cameras seemed frozen. Karen stood there breathing heavily, convinced she had taken control of the room, but Judge Judy simply stared at her, calmly, quietly, almost patiently. And that's when Karen made the horrifying realization. Judge Judy wasn't intimidated. She looked disappointed. Like a teacher watching a student fail an easy test, then came the response that would go viral across the internet. Judge Judy spoke slowly, carefully, every word sharp as glass. Miss Henderson, you do not pay my salary. The courtroom stayed silent. CBS pays my salary. This is private arbitration. You signed an agreement to appear here voluntarily. Karen tried interrupting. Judge Judy immediately shut her down. I'm not finished. Karen's confidence visibly started collapsing. Judge Judy continued, you are not my employer. You are not my supervisor. And screaming at me does not make your argument stronger. Then Judge Judy reached for a folder, and Karen's expression changed instantly because whatever was inside that folder terrified her. Judge Judy opened it so slowly. In 2019, you refused payment to another contractor after approving completed work. Karen's eyes widened. In 2021, you repeated the same behavior. Another page turned. In 2022, another contractor accused you of identical tactics. The audience gasped quietly. Karen looked completely stunned. She genuinely had no idea Judge Judy knew about her history. Then came the devastating moment. Judge Judy held up printed screenshots. Let's read your own words. Karen looked sick. Judge Judy read directly from Karen's social media posts. Here's how to avoid paying final contractor bills. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Judge Judy continued reading. Most contractors eventually give up if you pressure them long enough. Karen's face turned pale. Everything was unraveling publicly. Every lie, every manipulation, every tactic died by her own digital footprint. She began crying, actually crying, but Judge Judy showed no sympathy because by that point the tears didn't look like remorse. They looked like panic. Judge Judy's voice became even colder. You targeted hardworking people who couldn't afford long legal battles. You weaponized social media to destroy reputations. You turned honest labor into opportunities for fraud. Karen sobbed quietly, but the destruction wasn't over yet. Judge Judy delivered the ruling with absolute finality. Judgment for the plaintiff. David closed his eyes briefly in relief. Judge Judy continued. $3,200 for unpaid contracted work. Then she added something unexpected, and additional damages for reputational harm caused by false public accusations. Karen looked stunned again. The total judgment climbed significantly higher, but then Judge Judy delivered one final blow. This matter will also be referred for further investigation due to evidence suggesting a pattern of fraudulent conduct. The courtroom exploded with whispers. Karen completely broke down. The woman who entered the courtroom feeling powerful now looked shattered. And within hours, the internet made sure nobody would ever forget it. Clips of the confrontation spread everywhere online. Millions of views, reaction videos, commentary channels. The phrase, I pay your salary, instantly became internet shorthand for entitlement and arrogance. But while Karen became infamous, David's life changed in the opposite direction. Customers flooded his business with support. People praised his professionalism. News outlets covered his story. And for the first time in months, David finally felt something he had almost lost completely: validation, justice, hope. Meanwhile, Karen's reputation collapsed publicly. Her social media pages disappeared. Former victims came forward, additional legal problems reportedly followed, and the woman who once enjoyed humiliating others online suddenly discovered what public humiliation actually feels like. That's what makes this story unforgettable. Not just the screaming, not just the viral moment, but the deeper lesson underneath it. Karen spent years believing intimidation was power. She thought loud voices and public pressure made her untouchable. But eventually, she encountered someone who couldn't be bullied, someone smarter, more experienced, and fully prepared. Because in Judge Judy's courtroom, arrogance isn't strength, it's evidence. And the moment Karen screamed, "I pay your salary," she didn't intimidate the judge. She handed Judge Judy exactly what she needed to destroy her credibility forever.